Sigmund Freud once said that people don't want freedom because it involves taking responsibility, and most people don't want to have to take the amount of responsibility necessary to even glimpse what the idea of freedom looks like. And biblically, I forget where it is written, but I remember the line. It says, the price of peace is eternal vigilance, which is the same thing, because a peaceful mind unaffected by outcomes in the world and unaffected by the comings and goings of the world is a mind that has been freed from its temporal associations and has no further use for such sorts of things. And if you're a student of A Course in Miracles, you'll be aware that Jesus coins it that the secret of salvation is that you're doing this to yourself. You're doing it to yourself. And you really have to let that sink in. The whole point of any spiritual discipline is to realize the self, the nature of the true self, the higher self, not this idea of what I think I am as this bodily self-identity that I've concocted as a Dave making a video, etc., etc. Given a new purpose, however, Dave making a video does become a useful tool for the higher self within the framework of the dream to represent the fact of the matter in salvation, that yes, you're doing this to yourself, and offer a purposeful and collaborative way to come to not only change the nature of your life, wherein you cease to become, let's say, the victim of the world or pushed around by external circumstances, because you're learning to depend on a higher power and learning that you're supported by that higher power no matter what external circumstances seem to look like. But also where you come to learn that this world, as Jesus says in the New Testament, this world is not your home, and that where he is going, you will go too. But he leaves that up to you. He leaves that whole decision up to you. Yes, Jesus, I'm going to follow you. I'm going to apply this forgiveness unilaterally across the spectrum of my world as a representation of accepting forgiveness from the Holy Spirit, which, when you realize what forgiveness actually is, it's an undoing. It's not like the world's idea of forgiveness where somebody did something to you, and because you're the better of the two people, you'll forgive them and all of that. It's got nothing to do with that. That only justifies the idea that you think somebody did something to you. And in truth, no one has ever done anything to anyone. And that's going to be a big pill to swallow. Once you realize that this is an illusion and that you're safe in eternity, that you've never gone anywhere but in dreams, and that dreams don't define you, you begin to look at everything without bias, maybe. Hopefully without bias. And you begin to appraise your life. But you're not going to reappraise your life. You're not going to reappraise your relationships to the nth degree until finally you come to realize that there is nothing in the world that's ever going to bring you happiness, and that you're just repeating a cycle again and again and again within the framework of the alpha and the omega of your immediate experience, and on the bigger context within the framework of alpha and omega, as in all lifetimes across all spectrums, dimensions, everything. It's all happening right here and now, going on again and again and again and again and again. Not as an idea of repeating the past, perhaps, but think of it more like, I don't know if anyone's as old as me can remember this, but when a needle gets stuck in a groove on a record and it keeps jumping back to, and it's the same thing again and again and again. The only difference is that in time and space, because we're looking at an idea of the potential to be separated from source, which is what the whole experience is symbolic of, every time you come around again, it looks slightly different. It looks like something else, but it's still the same storyline: separation from source, separation from God. And you ask yourself, is there a God? Why is God doing this to me? And all of these sorts of things. And you have to really start to see it from the way I see it, I guess, and the way Jesus sees it, that you're actually caught. You're caught in a trap. You're caught in that record going around and around and around. And salvation is a rescue effort, right? And you begin to participate with your rescuers and cooperate and collaborate with your rescuers by beginning to retrain your mind, firstly, about what you think you are and where you think you are, through faith, through actions of faith, that will give you a new perspective on the world. You know, if you apply faith to your life often enough in various circumstances and situations, you'll begin to realize, however dimly perhaps, that you actually are supported by a higher power. And as you begin to realize that, the idea of being dependent upon situations lining up to your advantage out in the world begins to automatically fall away. So you learn to live in faith, or you learn to be miracle-minded, which is the same thing, to the point where faith is no longer required, because you cannot deny the fact to yourself that you are supported by a higher power. It's only when you're in denial that you need the reference points to help you realize that you're actually not. You know, you're not separated from God, and God being the universal field of life. Let's look at it that way. The great I am. The immediacy of salvation is what I'm always interested in. It's what I look at, the immediacy of the liberation of my mind from the conceptual nightmare of the cause and effect relationships of believing in this dualistic yin-yang thought system that perpetuates the external versus internal reconciliation that never stops. Never stops. That voice in your head just goes blah, 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 blah. This one and then that one, and this is better and that's worse. And it just doesn't stop. And the escape from that is immediate. You just have to choose for it. You just have to make a decision for it. And Jesus says in the Course, even salvation is not beyond immediate learning. But it takes total responsibility to be able to broach or to bridge that span in the mind where you realize that you're doing it to yourself on one hand, and that you don't have to continue to do it to yourself on the other. Now, the remembrance of God, the memory of God, is something that is in you already, awaiting its appointed time to dawn upon you, even in the consciousness. It doesn't occur in consciousness, the memory, because everything is mind, whole mind. It occurs on a higher level where it's been kept safe, out of the sphere of consciousness where it can't be corrupted. But because God is all pervasive and omnipotent and what was the other word we had the other week? Can't remember. Ubiquitous. It is experienced even in the conscious domain. It's experienced here briefly. And it looks like, because you can't have two states in a simultaneous moment, you can't have God and then separation. The separation, which is the physical realm, vanishes, and God, being all pervasive and ubiquitous, completely fills the mind as, how would you call it, as reality, just for a second, and then you find yourself back here in the dream, right? Not you that you think you are in the dream, but you, mind, dreaming the dream, utilizing this avatar of Dave and whoever else you might think you are in as a thing. It's quite funny. It's quite tragic also. Delay in time is tragic. So whilst we laugh about it, and whilst I laugh about it, I've been doing this to myself, and there's a lot of this slapping of the forehead. Oh my God, I'm doing this. I'm still doing this. I keep reacting. I keep buying into the drama. I keep making it real to myself. You know, it's like, well, that falls away too. You just sort of realize, you laugh at yourself for a bit, and then it's like, all right, now let me do better. Let me. And one of the ways that occurs is you remember better by recognizing when it is that you forget, and seeing where it is that you're doing it to yourself. It's a a self-reinforcing practice, if you like. The moment that you see you've forgotten to remain awake to the truth of the fact of the matter that all of this is not so, it's all just an illusion, you find yourself back in the dream as, let's say, an awakening or awakening, like a little duckling, but an awakening mind, right, with a purpose. My purpose is to continue to solidify my learning gains so that I don't continue to fall back into sleep and continue to see myself as a victim of the world. And the world will always present the next thing that you can be the victim of. Don't you worry. If it's not the victim of Islamophobia, it'll be the victim of Donald Trumpophobia, or now it's Elon Muskophobia. And I'm just using world stage examples there. But in your own life, you can have little phobias of the person at work that triggers you all the time and all of these sorts of things. So you learn to use all those situations to your advantage to help you remember not to react, not to defend yourself, not to buy into the drama and verify it by doing so, but simply to accept that forgiveness for yourself from on high. Take a breath and just let it all go. If it's just a dream, why would you react to it at all? But the immediacy of salvation shows you that it's just a dream. Right? But that requires a determined mindset. And I didn't have, let's say, well, I guess I did have a kind of a determined mindset with regards to practicing my faith. But when it came to the point where I realized I was supported by a higher power, my determination really kicked in to try and realize and recognize and experience what that higher power was. And I'd done a lot of superficial, I guess, spiritual investigating at that stage with different religions, different spiritual practices, and all that sort of thing. And then finally the course came along, but not until I'd undergone the dark night of my soul, which I don't recommend. I would much more recommend the slowly evolving training program of spiritual transformation and the application of forgiveness. But that being said, everybody's journey has to look like what it looks like. However, you're given the opportunity now with this insertion of light to begin to learn that you don't need to participate in the linear version of time and space, that you can learn to begin to see it as it is, as a single instant, wherein at some point in what would have been that linear equation of the alpha and the omega thousands of years, at some point you had an awakening. Let's say it's here 10,000 years from now. You had a full awakening and realized the truth of yourself, right, in another 8 incarnations. Well, that's no longer part of the equation, right? Jesus comes along 2,000 years ago and says, look, you're going to be living in the resurrection. As soon as I resurrect, that's it. The whole continuum, the whole vibratory association of the continuum is changed, because I'm accepting atonement for myself for the idea of death, which is the underlying premise of everything in time and space. Everything, all things here die. And as it says in the Course, this is a place, the world is a place where all things come to die. So with that in mind, I give up the world, I follow Jesus, and it begins to flip like this. The whole linear equation begins to flip to the here and now, and then it goes vertical. Well, it flips by going vertical. I'm learning to be miracle-minded, not worldly-minded. So, and the more I practice miracle-minded, lower to higher to lower communication through prayer, meditation, and all of those sorts of things. And this is the slow way of doing things, remember? Slowly evolving training program. Salvation is immediate. It doesn't take this whole thing, but this is how most people prefer to face their fears, you know. But it begins to turn like that, and you begin to realize that your mind is receiving the training you're giving it to stay in the here and the now, in this present moment, to the point where you're no longer thinking about the past to plan the future. You're no longer concerned about the future based on ideas of how the past once was. You find that you're quite liberated from all of that because you're practicing this present moment. You're practicing living and being here. And then even that transforms in a kind of a meditative posture of mind where everything turns in on itself, and you realize that the here and the now as a experience, as an external experience and a living experience, is simply still the projection of a here and a now that is already over and gone in your own mind, in, let's say, the emanation or the projection of something that comes from an origin point within you. Now, that origin point within you is the Christ. That origin point within you is God mind creating. The kingdom of heaven is within. But as it comes into consciousness, it gets corrupted by the ego, produced into symbols and projected out there, and you look upon it, esteem that it's real, you touch it, you feel it, and that's what the mind, it's an incredible thing. And I'm sure everybody now has seen those illusions, things that spin, and then if you look at something for a long time, it's not what you thought it was, and all of these sort of scientific and psychological sort of fun illusions that and you realize the mind is making this up. And I did one the other day where there was a black and white picture of some sort of Balinese sunset, and there was a little green dot in the middle of the picture, and the narrator was saying to look at the little green dot and just keep your focus, and in your periphery you can see the palm trees and the shoreline and the clouds and whatever in the periphery of your vision, but you're focusing on the green dot. And the narrator was saying, now we're going to change the picture. And the picture slides across, and the same picture comes back, but it's in full color with the little green dot. And you remain looking at the little green dot, and there's the green palm trees, the blue ocean, the blue sky, the yellow sand, and the clouds. And then at the end, the narrator tells you, and now rewind this video and look at the two pictures. One's black and white, and the other one was black and white. Right? So my mind made up the colors for it because I was told it's going to be different, and just automatically, before I even saw the picture, it had an impression that trees are green, sky's blue. And that comes from way back here, from, I don't know why I point to my head, but in the back of consciousness, where everything that you're experiencing in the present moment, in the here and the now, has already been decided somewhere in the deep of your mind. And Ramana Maharshi used to say, look for the author of your thoughts. You won't find one. There's nobody at the steering wheel back there. Right? It's kind of like, when you look at a beer glass and you've got the bubbles coming up, and where do they